And for that reason, because that impinges upon the rights of others who are trying to engage in the core purpose of the university, those kinds of things have to be shut down firmly. Very firmly, regardless of the issue that's involved. Not too long ago, I talked a little bit about the recent protests, in air quotes, on college campuses, and about the need specifically for accountability. The pursuit of the truth, for any of those students wanting to become scientists, it cannot come without accountability for when you F things up, as it were. And so that's one of the reasons I got into that. But the other thing I mentioned there at the time was the I had noticed folks talking about how, like, look at all these faculty who coming out in support of these students and and all that kind of jazz. And I wanted to I emphasized at the time, well, that's not true of everybody. And I wanted to highlight some of these folks who are speaking quite bluntly to their respective administrations, the faculty speaking to their respective administrations, and making it bloody clear that they do not support the events being brought on by these particular students. And the reason I hesitate to use the word protest, and I explained it in the earlier video, is that a protest stops being a protest when you are impeding upon the rights of others. You don't have the right as a protester to keep people from moving about freely. You don't have a right as a protester to start harassing other people. You don't have a right, as it's not protest at all, to engage in violence, in vandalism, to occupy a building, perhaps, and to occupy grounds without the express permission of the person who owns the grounds, particularly in a case of a private university. So that's what I wanted to get into with this, and that's why I hesitate to call them protests when they involve those particular things, though I will make use of the language of others. As you can see, what I have here is from the Heterodox STEM Substack, but it is an open letter to the president, Alivisatos, I'm guessing, and Provost Baker, concerning the encampment, and this is specific to the University of Chicago, as written by Dorian Abbott, who is a professor there. Obviously, he's been featured in stories on this channel many times, and he's drafted this, and he's the lead author of it. And also, don't want to do that as much right now. He's the lead author of it, but just to make the point of professors here who are not putting up with this nonsense and don't want to put up with this nonsense. Dear President Alivisatos and Provost Baker, I hope I pronounced that name right, because that one's that one's tough. Allowing the continued encampment of protesters on our main quad imposes the following significant costs on the university. Time, place, and manner restrictions are put in place to ensure that expression furthers the goal of intellectual exchange in the pursuit of the truth. Flagrant violations of TPM restrictions undermine the purpose of the university. TPM restrictions are not being applied equally. If the university continues to allow TPM violations by these protesters while enforcing TPM restrictions on other groups, it is effectively violating the principle of institutional neutrality outlined in the Calvin Report. University of Chicago also was the one who came up with the Chicago Principles in here, which also supports that. And the Calvin Report also has the clause of institutional neutrality. It's been adopted by a number of universities in the last few years, in particular. So it's not nothing, but this is. I know I said in an earlier video, words are nice, statements are nice, but when it comes in a situation like these, you've got to live up to those principles that are in those statements, and that's what the professors here are accusing the president and the provost of not doing when the university doesn't enforce the rules equally. It prevents us from hearing opposing viewpoints, since these protesters have repeatedly ripped down and removed posters, flags, and banners they disagree with and shouted down speakers they disagree with. One of the things that is not covered in protest is you do not have the right to shut down somebody else's speech as part of a protest, what is known as the heckler's veto. And indeed, in science, you don't have the right to shut down another scientist from doing their work. one of the reasons you're thinking about this. It provides an incentive to engage in TPM violations and encourages future encampments. We risk chaos and the collapse of our ability to function as an institution of higher learning. This flagrant violation of our academic values is not going to end unless you take decisive action to remove and sanction these protesters while firmly rejecting their demands. Or to put it another way, you guys are the administrators, they're the students. You're the ones in charge of the university. Act like it. It's the basic thing here, and live up to your principles. Set an example of what your principles are and live up to them. And you can see the whole list of signers here. A bunch of these are, I think these are all University of Chicago professors or professors emeritus. So that's what I wanted to say there. Here, but there's also more. So Anna Krylov, who's featured on this channel many times, is a professor at University of Southern California. And so she spearheaded this particular open letter to Professor Margot Apostolos, the president of the University of Southern California Academic Senate, here on behalf of a number of professors here at the University of Southern California. So here's another one of professors saying, no, enough. But also pointing to other problems they are concerned about on campus. In here. We, the undersigned members, faculty members, write to express our deep concern and distress over the persistent and escalating anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism at USC. The harassment and intimidation of Jewish students has grown exponentially and has been allowed to escalate, reflecting a lack of prompt and decisive action from the administration. The frequency and severity of these anti-Semitic incidents have grown at alarming rates since the brutal terrorist attack on Israeli civilians on October 7th, 2023. They have been exacerbated by chants inciting violence, the behavior of some pro-Palestinian faculty, the university's inadequate response to the selection of Asna Tabassum as the valedictorian, and the tolerance of intimidation of Jewish students and vandalism of campus property. The lack of transparency and prompt action by the president and provost have led to dangerous rhetoric that blames Jews for manipulating university decisions, a narrative disturbingly reminiscent of the infamous protocols of the Elders of Zion. Currently, the campus is unsafe for Jewish and Zionist students. The policy instructing students to report complaints and wait patiently for results has failed. We are now at the end of the academic year, with students going into finals fearful and despairing. Campus operation has been disrupted, and the anti-Semitic and extremist expressions and the vandalism continue unabated. That's, again, not protests. Make the point. You can express whatever the hell you want, but the vandalism is not protest. President and provost have abandoned their commitment to zero tolerance of harassment and intimidation and to the protection of all members of our community. We urgently call on the Academic Senate to request a report from the president and the provost on their policies and outcomes related to protecting all students at USC. The administration must provide information to the campus community on how recent decisions, beginning with the selection of valedictorian and to the handling of the subsequent disruptions of campus operation, have been made. What the specific security threats cited for the cancellation of the valedictorian speech were, why the administration continues to allow protesting students and outside agitators to violate university rules, and what the full results of the investigations of students' complaints have been. Current policies have led to violating the due process rights of both students and professors. We need transparent answers, precise and effective policies, which are enforced strictly and even-handedly, and explanations of where free expression ends and impermissible harassment of individuals and disruption of the function of the university begin. We request that this information be made available before the 2024 commencement date. Well, I do not know when the commencement date is for USC off the top of my head. We need our campus cleared from illegal encampments and the perpetrators disciplined. That's actually probably the better word for folks who are, you might have started as a protest for redress of grievances, but, stuff you're doing now, you're just a perpetrator. Let's put it that way. Otherwise, Jewish students ought not to return to USC for the next academic year. This is not about freedom of expression, which we all hold dearly. This is about intimidation, disturbing the learning environment, and blatant acts of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, which the administration promised but failed to prevent. So there's a whole bunch of folks here from different centers and things on different centers and colleges on the USC campus. And they are still, collecting signatories. So if you happen to be watching this in your USC faculty, I would go ahead into the description and go email Anna because they will collect your signatories onto this. So now, I want to finish up with one other thing here, because this is all great and well and good. And I'm glad to see, I'm glad to highlight in this case the other faculty who are pushing against some of the things that are currently going on in a robust and healthy manner. And you may agree, you may disagree with me. That's fine. But it's actually good to see with the different faculty here. Either way, the other thing I wanted to highlight is that quite recently, the president of Columbia, Minouche Shafik, decided to issue a recent statement here against the protests. I have not, against the protests, for lack of a better word, on Columbia's campus. And you may recall from the news that at one point, the students at Columbia and outside agitators seized Hamilton Hall, named for Alexander Hamilton, as it were, who is one of the founders of this country. Seized it, vandalized it, did some serious damage before the university decided we've had enough of this and called in the New York Police Department to evict all of those perpetrators and arrest them. They drove away with a bus full of folks in custody, as it were. And so I have not seen this statement. It was just revealed to me shortly before this recording, before I sat down to record this. So we're going to watch it a little fresh because, at least according to the tagline here, you can see, she's saying some strong words against them. But bear in mind that on her watch, things did not get shut down quickly as they should have. To be honest, if you're just going to be a guarantee of disrupting the learning environment, you don't give in to folks' demands on that one. You shut it down. You make it very clear that you're the administrator in this one. You're the person in charge. But let's hear what Minouche Shafik has to say.
These past 2 weeks have been among the most difficult in Columbia's history. The turmoil and tension, division and disruption have impacted the entire community. You, our students, have paid an especially high price. You lost your final days in the classroom and residence halls. For those of you who are seniors, you're finishing college the way you started, online.
This is important to realize. The graduating class of 2024 was the class that came in 2020 during the pandemic. And a lot of them started their first academic year, at least partially, virtually. They didn't set foot on the actual campus of Columbia. As did many other universities did the same thing. Class of 2024 didn't actually set foot on campus until well into their first year, if not into their second year into their second academic year of classes. And she's recognizing that because of this whole madness, that same class that started virtually has to finish their degrees virtually because of these events on campus at Columbia, which is not fair to the students, and it is very disruptive of the learning environment. This is, again, why I say you cannot have at the university's pursuit of the truth without accountability for when things get effed up.
No matter where you stand on any issue, Columbia should be a community that feels welcoming and safe for everyone. We tried very hard to resolve the issue of the encampment through dialogue. Many people who gathered there were largely peaceful and cared deeply about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
That still doesn't excuse what happened. And, impeding the free movement of others by setting up things like that doesn't count to me as a form of protest. Now, I don't necessarily blame her for wanting to engage in the dialogue. I think that is a healthy thing to try and, talk with the students, understand why they're doing what they're doing. But it does have to come at some point that you are the one holding the students accountable for when they break the rules of your own university, which they had been doing from the start.
Academic leaders talked with students for 8 days and nights. The university made a sincere and good offer, but it was not accepted. A group of protesters crossed in...
Now, in fairness, I would like to, she said they made a sincere offer and it was not accepted. So in fairness, I would love to know, what was the offer? And why wasn't it accepted? That's actually what I would like to know in fairness to the other side. And because obviously the other side did not think of it as a good offer, but that's just in fairness.
A new line with the occupation of Hamilton Hall. It was a violent act that put our students at risk, as well as putting the protesters at risk.
They're not protesters at that point. When they occupy a building that they do not lawfully own, that is not protest. That is not covered under the First Amendment, and it's certainly not covered. It's certainly violations of those time, place, and manner restrictions that are common to all universities.
I walked through the building and saw the damage, which was distressing. But despite all that has happened, I have confidence. During the listening sessions I held with many students in recent months, I've been heartened by your intelligence, thoughtfulness, and kindness. The ones that impressed me the most were those who acknowledged that the other side had some valid points.
If true, that's actually very healthy. I will admit that. That's actually very healthy with the students if that's true, what she's saying, that that's what happened, that the two different groups had very valid points about each other. That's actually very heartening. Again, if true, what she's saying is true here. I obviously have nothing but her word to go off of, so I'm being, a little grain of salt with that. But I mean, it would be nice if that's the case. That's great, actually. That's definitely not what happened with respect to the groups of students, and we should be honest, outside agitators who did a lot of damage to the university. And I mean, if you saw when the UCLA encampment was torn down, they left all sorts of garbage and crap everywhere with that one. So it wasn't necessarily the most interesting. Wasn't great. Let's put it that way.
We need more of that at Columbia.
Mm-hmm.
Every one of us has a role to play in bringing back the values of truth and civil discourse that polarization has severely damaged.
This goes back to Jonathan Haidt's thing about truth or social justice being the telos of the university. And I agree with the sentiment that the pursuit of the truth is the telos, the ultimate purpose of the university, which is why you have to have different viewpoints. Why? Because we have our different biases, and sometimes we don't see things the same way and all this other kind of things. But it's also the reason why you must have accountability for when somebody tries to impose upon others. And that is the thing that has been the failure, I think, for a lot of administrators in the universities. I don't care necessarily about the different issues in here. I've said it many times. I don't necessarily care about the issue with this. That's the heart of the events going on here. It could be any number of different issues as the reason why that caused a lot of this chaos. That's not the concern for me, is the specific issue. It's what the administrators themselves are doing to make sure the university's core function is working correctly, the pursuit of the truth. And that is why I say to it again, accountability is a key part of this. Accountability meted out by the administrators for when students and faculty and staff do not allow that mission to work the way it is supposed to. And that basically means you cannot allow one group of folks to impede upon the rights of others, regardless of what the issue is that folks are so passionate about. You can't allow it. So, and that I think has been the failing of a lot of administrators. Manu Shafiq also, because, you allowed it to go on for how long? Before you finally did something, you allowed it to escalate to the point that it did, and you didn't mete out the accountability that you should have.
Here at Columbia, parallel realities and parallel conversations have walled us off from other perspectives. Working together, I know we can break down these barriers. As many of you know,
That's all well and good. Two things about that. You have to be committed to what Jonathan Rauch called a reality-based community with that, which is fundamental to science, right? This is one of the reasons, again, I talk about universities and stuff going on in the universities. Why? Because it's where we train the next generation of scientists. And the purpose of science, much like the purpose of a university, is the pursuit of the truth. And you have to have, again, divergent perspectives with that to be able to get at the truth, but also You need accountability for when somebody does the wrong things of preventing that function by impeding the rights of others. And so it's all well and good what she's saying, and I believe that they can, perhaps. But the other problem is, does everybody want to? Sorry, there was a bug crawling across my desk. Happens on occasion. Does everybody want to? That's an entirely different question. And so you're going to identify folks who don't necessarily want to be any part of that.
I was born in the Middle East. I grew up in a Muslim family with many Jewish and Christian friends. I spent 2 decades working in international organizations with people from every nationality and religion in the world, where if you can't bridge divides and see the other side's point of view, you can't get anything done. I learned from that experience that people can disagree and still make progress. The issues that are challenging us, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, anti-Semitism, and anti-Arab and anti-Muslim bias, have existed for a long time. And Columbia, despite being a remarkable institution, cannot solve them single-handedly.
No, of course not. Nobody can.
What we can do is be an exemplar of a better world, where people who disagree do so civilly, recognize each other's humanity, and show empathy and compassion for one another.
All well and good. How are you going to instill that into your students is what I'm not hearing. How are you going to instill that into your students? Like, I had Randy Wayne on for Side Chat Saturday, and I love his approach of allowing the different questions and conversations in the classroom. Are your professors on board with that? How are they all going to do that? So, President Shafiq, sounds lovely. How are you going to do it?
We have a lot to do, but I am committed to working at it every day and with each of you to rebuild community on our campus.
A lot of nice platitudes with that one, but we will have to see if it bears out. And like I said, this isn't to me about the specific issue that's going on. Obviously, tensions run high with the Israeli-Gaza conflict and all the emotions around that. But that's not the issue to me that is of concern. It's how the administration is choosing to handle it. Because the prime purpose of a university is the pursuit of the truth. Yeah? And you cannot have that unless you hold accountable the folks who would restrict that particular mission, regardless of whatever the issue is that's involved. I don't care necessarily about what the issue is. And you see, I haven't really gotten into what my thoughts are on the issue, because my thoughts on the issue specifically do not matter in this case of what I'm talking about. What matters with this is what the university administration is doing. Let it be any number of different issues that there could be conflict over at the university. How are you handling it? Facilitating respectful dialogue is a good thing, and it is something we should inculcate in the next generation of scientists, is respectful dialogue and in pursuit of the truth, yes. But allowing there to be no accountability when you have groups of students, regardless of what the issue is, groups of faculty, groups of outside agitators, who prevent that mission of pursuing the truth because they start restricting and impeding upon the rights of others in a campus environment, that's where you have to be able to firmly, as the university administration, firmly mete out punishment in a neutral way. I mean, I go back to Dorian's thing here. I mean, you have to do so in a neutral way in the same breath. So that's the point that I make with this, is that what's key with the universities and administration is how they handle things to make sure the core function of a university is working, that the university is working towards its core function at all times, and managing that difficult challenge, with the different viewpoints and what have you. But at the same time, folks can have different viewpoints. But like I said, protest does not include vandalism. It doesn't include occupying buildings or land. It doesn't include harassment of others. It doesn't include the heckler's veto where you're shouting down speakers. It doesn't include any of that. And for that reason, because that impinges upon the rights of others who are trying to engage in the core purpose of the university, those kinds of things have to be shut down firmly. Very firmly, regardless of the issue that's involved. So let me know what you think. Hit the like button on the way out the door, comment on the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, all that lovely good jazz. I'm Adrian. Till next time, I hope you stay curious.